It's week 5 of this Prismatic Draft League season. We are in the second half of the regular season now, and the Halifax Masquerainmen are, well, let's just look at the standings. Sitting at 500, just a tiny bit underwater in differential, 2-2, -1, and 1 game loss out of a playoff spot here at the halfway point. So a lot of different ways this can turn out. We will still have to have a stronger second half than the first half was in order to make the playoffs. It's certainly doable, but there's a lot of room to fall short as well, especially with such a competitive league so far this season. A whole bunch of teams with strong records up here, including 3 teams still undefeated: the Ontario Minchinos, Winchester Walreins, and Pendragon United. Fortunately, none of those are the opponent this week. We have played one already, and we will still play another of those 3, but this week's opponent is the Southern-style Grovyles, the team that came under new management last week and really shook their roster up with some trades, which made for some interesting prep. Fortunately, before we get into the matchup, I too have a trade to announce. I've shaken my team up a little bit too. Some parts were just not working in the first half of the season, and I have pivoted in a bit of a different direction going into this season. So I have made a trade, or 2 trades if you prefer, but the way the point values worked out, I did have to do both of them together in order to be able to do them at all. But I said in the draft recap that because evolutions were specially allowed, even though they were outside of the normal rules of this format, I would feel kind of silly if I didn't have one. But I guess it's time for me to feel silly then. Fortunately, I have brought some new cheer, some cheer to my team to make up for it, as I have dropped Umbreon and Bayonet and picked up Haunter and Pom Pom Oricorio. So, what does this trade do? Hopefully a lot of things. First thing to remember, this draft league has, in my experience, unusually tight restrictions on roster changes. I cannot freely trade out any Pokemon on my team for anything that nobody else has. I can trade any Pokemon on my team to another coach if the specific roster spots and point values where those are relevant line up, but that's hard to do. I think this is my 7th season in this league, and I think I've proposed a coach trade once in all this time and never actually made one. It's really hard to make a deal that works for both sides. I looked over my options a couple of times, in this case, this season, and I never saw anything that made sense to me, so I never even reached out to anyone else. There is also a mechanism to make free agent pickups, so to drop some Pokemon to the pool of unclaimed Pokemon and pick some Pokemon up. What's unusual about this league is, as we covered in the draft recap, and it's been the same every season, there are only 4 specific designated roster spots that you can swap around like that. They're called the free agent spots in this league. They're also the only ones that cost points to fill, but I cannot just drop Torkoal or Galarian Slowking or even Sudowoodo. Only the 4 Pokemon in my 4 free agent spots could be used in a trade like this. Those are, well, they're the ones marked with asterisks over here. That's why I use an asterisk. Gastrodon, Umbreon, Froakie, and Bayonet before this trade. And, of course, the point values have to add up. I used my entire points budget in the draft, so I have no wiggle room left over. That means that for any kind of incoming Pokemon that I... whatever the value of any Pokemon that I bring in a trade, I have to send at least equal value back to the draft board. So just straight up trading Froakie for Haunter, for example, was not an option because Haunter is worth more points than Froakie. So this trade, I think, it cuts some things that weren't really working for my team, and I think it also brings some more things that might work better. In terms of what wasn't working, my intention for Umbreon, as I talked about in the draft recap, was to use it as kind of like a bulky setup stat ball. I also thought I would bring a support set some weeks, but mostly my eyes were on like Calm Mind Umbreon, maybe Curse Umbreon, enabled by things like Sleep Powder Lilligant, Double Fake Out with Grookey and Hitmonlee, Rage Powder Skiploom, and even possible hazard setting with Pokemon like Slowking and Froakie to help it wear opposing teams down. I thought that looked pretty strong on paper going into the draft. It is always a shame when something strong on paper doesn't work in practice, but in practice, I only brought Umbreon to 1 week in the entire first half of the season, and it did not do a good job when I actually brought it to a game. And because we're we're a decent ways into the season now. I only have a few weeks left to play. I can look over all of my remaining matchups and kind of brainstorm ideas. And I did for every one of my remaining matchups before I pulled the trigger on this trade. I didn't build teams, but I workshopped some basic concepts for what kinds of modes I could bring. And there was nothing where Umbreon felt like an especially good fit. There are some matchups where maybe Umbreon is viable, but even then it takes a lot of resource investment. I probably have to commit to terrestrializing it and get the Terra type just right and have specific supports in place, run a whole game plan through Umbreon. And the value I get back for that is kind of questionable because Umbreon doesn't hit very hard. It probably needs a lot of setup to pull off that kind of game plan. There's no perfectly consistent way to do it against any of the remaining teams in my schedule. It's a ton of investment for something that is not so likely to pay off that I think it's worthwhile. So as much as I liked that Umbreon on paper, that Umbreon idea, it didn't work in practice so far, and I don't think it will again. That means Umbreon was kind of the most expendable Pokemon on my team, which I've known for a couple weeks now. Honestly, the reason I held on to it as long as I did was in part because I really liked its matchup into this week's opponent, the Grovyles, because they have Psy Spam, which Umbreon shuts down with Dark typing, Snarl, and Special Bulk. They have Charmeleon Sun options, which again Umbreon can throw a Special Bulk at, and with Inner Focus, Umbreon doesn't even have to worry about being flinched by Sawsbuck. But even then, with the Grovyles picking up Medicham and Masquerain, I was still looking at setup Umbreon options, and there was still a way to make it work, but it was definitely not nearly as safe as it was against the previous version of that team. And again, it would take a ton of resources and be dubious to actually work. So as much as I've liked having Umbreon here in theory, it's just not working out. That means I can swap it back to the draft board, and Umbreon as an A-tier Pokemon does get me the most possible points for any Pokemon, so there were a lot of options that I could bring in to replace it. I even considered some other evolutions that are still out there on the draft board. In the end, I brainstormed multiple possible trades, and again, sort of theory crafted each of them against my remaining matchups to try to find out what had the best matchups generally into the rest of my schedule, and also what covered the most important things where I didn't necessarily know what I would do either. To see what clicked into place. This specific trade for Haunter and Oricorio actually was one of the last ones I thought of. I checked a bunch of others first, but I was interested in in Haunter because, well, I'm actually interested in Haunter and Oricorio for similar reasons. I just came up with the Oricorio part of it later. Both of them are immediately the two fastest Pokemon that I have on my team by base speed. I've talked up Hitmonlee being extremely fast with Unburden and Lilligant with Chlorophyll, and that's real, but both of those require specific setups and are vulnerable to things like the neutralizing gas wheezing that I faced last week. I don't have very much base speed on my team. Haunter and Oricorio do a lot to make up for that, and they make my team kind of more dynamic in that way, where I have the Trick Room option, but I also have fast offensive options. Haunter hits harder than Umbreon or Bayonet. Notably, it has a much stronger Hex than Bayonet, which is nice when my team has a few ways to spread status, though they haven't actually been hitting their targets so far. But also it just has a much clearer identity as a powerful special attacker with a very broad move pool. Haunter also has an incredible support move pool, and again with that speed stat, it can put a ton of different support moves to use more effectively than Bayonet can. It's just a faster Will-O-Wisp, it's just like a faster Taunt or whatever, Curse, but then Haunter also gets a bunch of other moves that I'm not even going to try to list off right now. It even gets Perish Song if I can find a use for that some week, although that's probably a little bit dubious. So yeah, I was very interested in Haunter, but there were other Pokemon that I thought looked pretty strong in the B tier, and the only way that I could get a second B tier Pokemon along with Haunter, but the only way that I could make the points work was if I gave up not just Umbreon, but also either Gastrodon or Bayonet. Gastrodon has been my best Pokemon so far. I do hope that this trade will make me less dependent on it, because it's been really awkward to rely so much on it with that glaring double weakness. But I still think that it has a valuable part to play on this team going forward. I just hope that it won't have to be every single week anymore. But by swapping out Bayonet, which again I think is just worse than Haunter as a ghost type on this team, especially after the one time I brought it against the Winchester Walreins, when in order to make the specific set that I wanted work, I had to make a bunch of concessions. Again, Bayonet is slow, so I ran a Choice Scarf, but even then I had to go Jolly, and then that meant that its damage was pretty significantly nerfed. I like Bayonet. I was kind of enthusiastic about drafting it just because it's a cool Pokemon that you don't see very often, but it wasn't bringing that much to the table, and I think it was pretty expendable for a roster upgrade, and certainly a lot more expendable than Gastrodon. Pom Pom Oricorio gives me an electric type, which is something that I was interested in all the way back in the draft, but did not have until now. It's just a nice type to have on pretty much any team, but also, if you watched Reckless Trico's side of our Week 3 set, you know they called out my team's flying weakness with multiple weakness Pokemon weak to flying and only one resist in Sudowoodo. That is not exactly a Pokemon I can bring every week. Oricorio is not very bulky, but it is a second flying resist, so at least I have that going for me. And Haunter and Oricorio both are immune to ground with the Levitate and the flying typing respectively. That's not as big a deal when I already have 3 grass types and 2 water types, but having my 2 highest tier Pokemon, Torkoal and Slowking, both be weak to ground has, I can tell you, been awkward in the builder some weeks, and is something that I have had to cover for. And so these 2 additional immunities, along with Skiploom, do make that somewhat easier. But Oricorio also, it's not a super strong offensive Pokemon, but it can set up with Quiver Dance. It has some interesting support options like Feather Dance and Baton Pass. Maybe even some week a Baton Pass Quiver Dance boosts out to Haunter or Lilligant, or even Gastrodon maybe if the matchup is right. So it gives me a little bit of flexibility in that way, but also of course with Dancer I can have Oricorio mess with some opposing setup like the possible Quiver Dance Masquerain this week, or even get an extra Quiver Dance next to Lilligant. If Lilligant and Oricorio both click Quiver Dance in the same turn, thanks to Dancer copying the opponent's or any other Pokemon's dance move, Oricorio will also use Quiver Dance, and yeah, it'll get to +2, while Lilligant also gets to +1. So that's a very strong duo, at least on paper, in some matchups. So that's what I'm hoping to see from these 2 Pokemon. I do think that I have, with this trade, cut out a fair bit of what was not working with my team, which was 1, the bulky setup stuff that just was too slow and too inconsistent, and 2, the over-reliance on very slow Pokemon that meant I either got Trick Room up or ran a ton of bulk, or I was just in danger. I've made my team faster and a little bit more dynamic with this trade, and while I'm not sure that will fix everything deficiency from the draft, I'm hopeful that it will definitely make me harder to play against for my next few opponents, and that we can still make that playoff push, even though it is going to be difficult. And I'm still thinking about... I don't think I'm ever trading away Gastrodon, most likely. I would need a really incredible possibility. I am still thinking about trading Froakie for something else, but I won't say what just yet in case I actually do it. But just remember, Froakie is an untiered Pokemon, has the lowest possible point value in the league, so whatever I get back for it will also not be very good. That's pretty low stakes whether I trade Froakie, but it is something I'm thinking about. Anyway, with that said, here is the matchup. I've already started to talk about it a little bit, but they have the Grovyles have the Psy Spam mode with Indeedee and Calyrex. We also saw Expanding Force Medicham last week. It was not very strong. I don't know if we'll see it again, but they do have that option. I think Medicham is more interesting as a fighting type, along with their other 2 fighting types, Riolu and Scrafty, to help to cover the weaknesses of the Psy Spam mode, and in particular make it very scary to click Terra Dark in front of this team, because all of a sudden you're weak to that possibility. I think Psychic and Fighting is actually a pretty decent pair of types to load up on in that way, because if you try to cover the obvious big burst Psychic type damage that easily comes from this team, then the Fighting types might just feast. And they also have Riolu able to use Coaching to boost the damage from Medicham or Scrafty on the physical side, or Sawsbuck, which is also a threat. Yeah, with Prankster, Riolu also can mess with the weather, so I can't rely on Sun being super consistent into this team, because they could have priority Rain Dance Riolu. That said, they also might want to take advantage of their own Sun. They could run Chlorophyll Sawsbuck, they could run Solar Power Charmeleon. They could run Grovyle with a Psychic Seed in Psychic Terrain, and then pair that with Charmeleon and set up a Sea of Fire on my side of the field to increase their damage output somewhat more. They don't have Brionne anymore, so I don't have to worry about the Swamp combo, but they do have that option. They do have the other Pledge combo option. The Sawsbuck also can run a Serene Grace set and try to flinch through my whole team with Headbutt. And those are the main threats, but then they also have double Intimidate with Scrafty and Masquerain, so physical attackers are a little bit harder to bring into this team. And I don't know what a Alolan Graveler does except Wide Guard. I'm not super expecting to see it, but I have tried to have some coverage for it anyway, and I really don't know what Minccino does. Although, when I was looking over it, heading into when I was getting these images together, I noticed that it's not super slow when it gets after you, so maybe it could play some Lilligant shenanigans, but it is slower than Lilligant. Anyway, I've been rambling for a while already, but I think getting through this week's team should probably be pretty quick. The game plans are fairly simple, and it does start with a new face on our team. Pom Pom Oricorio is making its season debut immediately. The goal of this Oricorio, there's a reason I was willing to say earlier that I have the double Quiver Dance available with Lilligant. That is the kind of thing where, under different circumstances, I might think, maybe I don't say that just yet, just in case an opponent doesn't think of it before we play, but I am bringing it right away this week. I'll tell you now, Lilligant is on this week's team as well. If I think I'm going to see a Psy Spam lead, I have the option to lead Lilligant and Oricorio, and just get Oricorio to +2 special defense and special attack and speed immediately. Oricorio still doesn't hit that hard, which is why it has some special attack investment and a sharp beak. Those two things together make a real difference to the air slash calcs. But yeah, the hope here is that Oricorio can make that kind of special attacking mode hard for the opponent to take advantage of. And then of course, as a flying type, it's also threatening into their physical attackers. I mean, it can be flinched by Sawsbuck, that's kind of awkward, but the fighting types don't especially like to deal with it. Terra Psychic is here so that it can have the option of resisting Psychic while also still resisting fighting. It is weak to a Scrafty Crunch still, but overall I think Psychic is a pretty reasonable Terra type into a lot of the modes that this opponent can bring. And Mario Man, coach of the Azure Bay Chadots, if you're watching this, I did take some inspiration from your Terra Psychic Bastardon the other week. I think I pretty much penciled this into my builder like as soon as I finished watching that. The speed is for both Oricorio and Lilligant are at about the same speed level, though I made sure they're not tying. I think it's guaranteed to outspeed Calyrex. I think that's what it is. Sawsbuck is faster. It has a higher base speed than anything on my team, and it can also have Chlorophyll or easily be running a Choice Scarf, so there's not a lot I can do about that. But yeah, I definitely wanted to get my Quiver Dances up before Calyrex can attack, so... or maybe it was Metacham. Whichever one of the two has a higher base speed, Metacham or Calyrex. I wanted to get my Quiver Dances up before it can attack, so that's what the speed stat is for on this Pokemon. Otherwise... I think everything's just about covered. Revelation Dance gives it some coverage, and of course it'll change from an electric type attack to a psychic type attack if I terastallize, but Air Slash is the main attack here. Then we have the Lilligant. I already tipped my hand about that. Oricorio also running Protect because with Dancer it can Protect and get a Quiver Dance in the same turn if Lilligant clicks Quiver Dance. But yeah, Lilligant is here with a Covert Cloak so that it can't be flinched by a Fake Out from Scrafty, or if they have another Fake Out user that I'm forgetting, there's that too. And that way it can guarantee that Quiver Dance for Oricorio while Oricorio protects on the same turn, if that's what I want to, the way I want to play things. Terra Psychic for the same reason as Oricorio. The rest of the moves I actually did have some trouble figuring out though. There were like, I don't know, 6 or 7 different moves I wanted to run on Lilligant this week, and I may yet go back and make changes before we play, although I think this is probably the final version. I do have Chlorophyll, so you can guess that I'm bringing Sun this week, but again, it is also meant to outspeed Calyrex or Metacham, whichever one I was calcing for. Not calking, but you know what I mean. I guess it is a form of calking, a very simple one, before Chlorophyll is active. Quiver Dance is necessary to set up Oricorio. That is the main thing that it's here for. Lilligant is not here to be an attacker, but with Weather Ball, I can land Fire-type damage into the opponent's Grass types, like Calyrex and Sawsbuck, and Grovyle, as long as I have the Sun up. Sleep Powder, hopefully with Lilligant outspeeding most of their Pokemon, can disrupt any offensive modes they can throw at me, so Oricorio or somebody else can set up somewhat more safely. And then with After You, I do have the option to get a fast eruption with Torkoal. I did not have After You originally, but I think it's worthwhile, especially because I'm not bringing Trick Room this week. So giving Torkoal any kind of speed control option at least some of the time, I think it is a valuable thing to have. And in certain positions, I might even be able to just blow the opposing team up early, you know, if they don't respect it and they don't lead right in something like a game 2 or 3. Obviously, Torkoal is here, but I am bringing something that I haven't before this season, the Eject Pack Torkoal. I asked in the Wolfglick subscriber Discord because I couldn't remember whether Torkoal sets Drought before switching out if it leads into an Intimidate with an Eject Pack, and the opponent does have 2 Intimidate users, so it is a relevant question. But I believe Showdown does now well, these are two separate things. I think Showdown does now work correctly, and I think work correctly means that it will set the sun, even if it's switched out immediately. Maybe I'll test that before I play, instead of just relying on someone else's word. Anyway, this is a pretty typical Torkoal set otherwise. I do have the Eruption burst damage option, but one of the first things that I had in mind for this set was to have the Eject Pack and Overheat, so that, again, if I'm playing toward an Oricorio game plan, I can lead Torkoal with Lilligant, or with Oricorio, actually, and I can protect Oricorio because I don't have Protect on Lilligant. That works too. But that way I get the sun up, and then I can make sure Torkoal gets off the field. With Overheat, Torkoal will be the slowest Pokemon, so if the Overheat is what activates the Eject Pack, then whatever switches in for it will guaranteed get in safely. And then I can go for the setup with Lilligant having Chlorophyll active. Otherwise, big Fire-type damage into the opponent's team. Earth Power covers some other things like Alolan Graveler pretty well. Basically, nicely cover... Oh, and Charmeleon. Yeah, it nicely covers whatever the Fire-type damage doesn't. Terra Dark, so I have the option of just throwing a Psychic Immunity onto Torkoal so that I can maybe get a big Eruption into a Psy Spam mode if they're not expecting that, and they just try to Expanding Force through it. And Min Speed, because while I'm not bringing Trick Room, the opponent does have Indeedee and could conceivably bring a Trick Room mode against me. I don't think it's especially likely, but if they do, then Torkoal is here to take advantage. Grookey's here. The opponent has Psychic Terrain. Chances are I want my own Terrain setter. Again, Oricorio is set up to take Expanding Force pretty well, even if I set it up properly, even in Psychic Terrain, but being able to turn that terrain off is another big way to nerf my opponent's damage if they do play that kind of Psy Spam mode, which they leaned on pretty heavily last week. Grookey has a speed reducing nature that makes it guaranteed slower than Indeedee, so that I can always have terrain control in the lead position if I want it. Otherwise, it's just here to do typical Grookey stuff. It can U-turn out, get the terrain control back up, or it can throw off big wood hammers, priority grassy glides, all the usual stuff. I did consider a defensive Terra type on Grookey to cover for things like Charmeleon and Masquerain, but in the end I decided it's not super likely that I Terrasilize Grookey, and if I do, it's more likely that I'll want the extra damage on a grassy glide or something like that, so I have just stuck with Terra Grass here. Pretty simple. Next is Hitmonlee. I have Grassy Seed, Hitmonlee. I did actually think about Psychic Seed, but I think it's more reliable to know when I can activate my own Unburden. Terra Psychic needs no explanation at this point, but this Hitmonlee is running max speed, so that even without Unburden, it'll outspeed a lot of the Pokemon on the opposing team. Not Sawsbuck, and I think not Grovyle, but most of the rest of what they have should be slow. Yeah, is slower than max speed Hitmonlee, even if I don't have my Grassy Terrain up. This I think is valuable because I think especially in Game 1, it's fairly likely that I'll bring all three of Torkoal, Lilligant, and Oricorio, so I only have room for one more Pokemon after that. I think most likely is Grookey, but it depends on what they have. If it's Hitmonlee without Grookey, I still want to be able to hit things hard and fast. But if I do get the Unburden up with Hitmonlee, then I'm outspeeding Sawsbuck, at least in some positions, not Chlorophyll and Sun, but in other positions I can threaten it with a close combat, and either way, Hitmonlee can threaten Pokemon like Scrafty with close combat. Close combat does big neutral damage into a lot of the team except the Psychic types, and then Lunge covers the Psychic types very nicely. I didn't know Hitmonlee could learn Lunge. I noticed that when I was scrolling through the builder preparing this team. I had Knockoff penciled in at first, and then for a little bit I had both of them. But yeah, Lunge, of course, just blows up Calyrex. It does a lot to Indeedee. It's pretty solid coverage here. The only thing that Hitmonlee does not have any good coverage for is Masquerain. But given that I have game plans centered on Flying type, Fire type, Fire, Weather Ball, and Sun, I have other answers to Masquerain. I don't think Hitmonlee needs to beat it. The one awkward move here is the Swords Dance. I did not have that in the set originally, but my opponent has 2 Intimidate users, and I don't want to run a clear Amulet because I want the Grassy Seed to be able to outspeed Sawsbuck at least some of the time. So Swords Dance is kind of the only way I have for Hitmonlee to offset Intimidate. I don't think it's especially likely that I click it, but you know, if Lilligant puts things to sleep or Grookey gets a timely fake out or something, maybe I get an opportunity to Swords Dance, and maybe Hitmonlee can go kind of crazy with that, or at least it can offset some attack drops. Lastly for this week, a Pokemon that I'm not feeling especially likely to bring, but I certainly have the option if I want it, and it is the other newcomer making its season debut. I am bringing Haunter immediately this week. I was considering a couple of different sets, but Haunter, again, One of the great things that it brings to my team is that it's a lot faster. Well, not a lot, but it is faster than anything I had before. And I think just using it as a fast attacker with a focus sash is pretty solid here. It'll outspeed most of the opponent's team. I think it ties with Sawsbuck in base speed. And of course it resists or is immune to Sawsbuck's stabs. But Sawsbuck can have coverage and it has ways to be faster. But the point is, Haunter matches up well speed-wise into a lot of the opponent's team. They don't have a lot of poison resists. I actually think Alolan Graveler is the only one before Terra. Maybe I'm forgetting something. But I know I checked that they didn't have a lot of poison resist, so I can just throw off big sludge bombs into a lot of their team. And yeah, with the Focus Sash, Haunter will take 2 hits to remove, of course. Dark Pulse gives it a little bit more coverage. It has that neutral option into things that do resist Sludge Bomb. It also still is strong into Indeedee and Calyrex, not so much Medicham. I went back and forth between Dark Pulse and Sludge Bomb, but I like Dark Pulse for being able to do damage to Indeedee, given that it's a normal type with Follow Me. Being able to damage Sawsbuck is also kind of nice, and I guess Minccino if they bring that. And Terra Dark means that Haunter also has a surprise psychic immunity that it can switch on if I want, like Torkoal. But also, of course, it boosts the damage to Dark Pulse. I did go back and forth between that and Terra Poison just to have the strongest possible Sludge Bomb, but I think the surprise immunity could be pretty powerful if the position is just right. And since I'm also running Dark Pulse, it is pretty worthwhile. And finally, Taunt is a way to shut down something like Follow Me Indeedee or Coaching Riolu. Not immediately, of course. They do get to use their thing at least once, maybe more if they have a mental herb, but at least I have some kind of tool that I can throw at those if I'm worried about them snowballing. Anyway, I thought this was going to be a short one, but I guess I talked for a long time about the trade. That went on for a while. Hopefully the battles will be worth the wait, but that is the team, and it is a very new look for the Season 8 Halifax Masquerainmen. I don't know if I'll bring the Haunter to a game this week, but I am definitely looking forward to seeing how Pom Pom Oricorio does in its season debut. We started the first half of the season losing to an Oricorio. Now let's try to win with an Oricorio to start the second half, right? Okay, it's time. It's been a few days since that first part. In between, I checked the base speed stats of Medicham and Calyrex. They have the same base speed, so all those times I said whichever one is faster. Never mind that. Good luck, have fun, Shadow. What have we got here? Indeedee, Medicham, Masquerain, Calyrex, Grovyle, Charmeleon. Okay, I actually was a little bit worried that I might be over-preparing for Size Spam, and I might lose to some kind of Scrafty mode, but there's no Scrafty and there is Size Spam, so I think we like that. I mean, I think game 1 I probably lead Torkoal Lilligant, right? And then, or Torkoal Oricorio. Torkoal Oricorio, I can protect Oricorio turn 1. If I lead Lilligant, I can sleep powder something, except I can't lead. I can't sleep powder Calyrex or Grovyle. If it's Goggles Indeedee with Follow Me, that ruins that too. Also, maybe I just don't want Indeedee to be the sleep powder target. So, okay, I'll lead Torkoal or Oricorio with Lilligant. And probably Grookey in game 1. I don't know, Grookey changes the terrain, but it really doesn't do much offensively to most of these Pokemon. Maybe I bring Haunter. Even Hitmonlee could be interesting. But yeah, they didn't bring any poison resist. Let's bring Haunter to game 1. So both Oricorio and Haunter making their game debuts here. It's Grovyle Medicham lead, so no terrain. That means no immediate unburden to worry about on the Grovyle, and I think I would like to just overheat this. Does Medicham get Fake Out? I should know this. But what's the threat even if it does? I'm just going to try to overheat this Medicham right away. Protect Oricorio. And the plan, of course, is get Torkoal switched out with the sun up, and then I can click Quiver Dance. Well, potentially I can click Quiver Dance with both Lilligant and Oricorio. That's the dream. Okay, Indeedee switches in. It sets the terrain, but there's no Psychic Seed on the Grovyle. I missed the overheat. That's pretty unfortunate, but there's really not much of an offensive threat on the board right now, so I might even be able to just Erupt, but I think overheat into Indeedee again is better here, because they can get damage on Torkoal, right? I could Terra Dark the Torkoal, but I don't think I want to use my Terra right now. Also, I could Terra Psychic Indeedee. Or, I mean, Oricorio. I could Terra Psychic Oricorio. That would take a Psychic type attack from the Indeedee better, but I don't know if it's going for a Psychic attack. That is kind of the most obvious thing. And I'm not really worried about Medicham if I Terra Psychic, but I don't know what their last Pokemon is. I'm going to say there's not much of a threat on the board right now. I'm just going to click Quiver Dance with no Terra. They fake out in Psychic Terrain. That would work on Oricorio because it's a flying type, but it does not work on Torkoal. I miss another Overheat. Okay. But I got a Quiver Dance at not much cost, as that Drain Punch from Grovyles isn't doing very much. I'll try one more time to Overheat the Indeedee. Well, at least one more time, the way this is going. Another Quiver Dance seems pretty free. They could Trick Room. And that would really kind of flip things around on me, but even then I probably have some counterplay. But also, if I just land this Overheat, I at least do big damage to Indeedee with higher priority than Trick Room. But yeah, I'm just making the same play again. They didn't show really that they have anything for it last turn. We'll see what they show this time. It is good to know that the Indeedee has Fake Out, because again, it can Fake Out Oricorio before Terra, because Oricorio is a flying type, so it's immune to terrain effects. Haunter also is immune to terrain effects, but it's a ghost type, so they can't Fake it out unless I click my Terra type on Haunter, and I definitely remember what Terra type that is. I think it's Terra Poison? No, Dark. Terra Dark. Then Haunter would be protected by the terrain, so it's a wash. Okay, the Psychic Seed is on Medicham. Luring Voice on Indeedee, they confuse Oricorio. That's a nice tech. We miss a third consecutive Overheat. By the way, I could have been clicking Eruption this whole time. They haven't attacked Torkoal once. Let's try to Overheat the Medicham. Maybe I'm just picking the wrong targets. Although, yeah, I've missed 3 Overheats into Indeedee, right? Oh, it's also Life Orb Indeedee. I missed that. I'm gonna... The Medicham could have Fake Out if it learns Fake Out. Why can't I remember whether Medicham learns Fake Out? Why am I blanking on that? I'm just going to protect Oricorio this turn. Terra Psychic, okay. Oricorio hurts itself. We finally land an Overheat. It doesn't quite KO Medicham thanks to that boost, but I can go Lilligant here. I do already have Oricorio at +2. Lilligant's only attack is Weather Ball. I think I might be better off going Haunter here. But there is Life Orb Indeedee. It could click Psychic. Even if I Terra the Haunter, it has Alluring Voice. I think I'm good with Lilligant. They do set Trick Room this turn. Okay. That actually makes things trickier. It really does. Yeah. That said, if I get Torkoal back in with Trick Room still up, it is unfortunate then that Torkoal has taken damage. And I don't have Heat Wave, but... there are ways to make this work. I think what I'm going to do for now is I'm going to click Quiver Dance with Oricorio. No, I'm just going to try to Weather Ball the Medicham. And by Oricorio, I meant Lilligant anyway. I'm just going to try to Weather Ball the Medicham and protect Oricorio. I didn't successfully protect last turn, so yeah. As long as I don't get Confusion Self-Damage again, it works this time. Lilligant took quite a bit from that Medicham Expanding Force. We do knock Medicham out now. And 3 more turns of Trick Room. Here's the Masquerain. The Masquerain is a threat to Lilligant. It's not as threatening to Oricorio. It might be worth it to sack Haunter to preserve the Lilligant. I am now realizing Terra Psychic Lilligant means I can't turn off its bug weakness. I'm pretty sure I didn't think of that in the builder. What did Indeedee go for that turn? Protect. So we've seen Protect, Fake Out. Oh, it doesn't have a Psychic type attack. Okay. Then Haunter is actually probably a fine switch here. And I'll just go for Revelation Dance into Masquerain. Electric type, 100 accuracy, just have to break through Confusion. Haunter comes in nicely on that Alluring Voice. Oricorio at +2, takes more damage than you might think from that Bug Buzz, but yeah, it'll knock Masquerain down to its Sash. I think next is just a double Protect turn. Maybe not. Maybe I actually needed to be trying to get Torkoal back in here once I knew that the Indeedee didn't have a Psychic attack. Oricorio breaks out of Confusion, so that's good. I go Alluring Voice into Haunter. I honestly might go for the double protect on Oricorio, because if it gets through this turn, then it's in good shape on the other side of Trick Room. I am just going to do that, and I'm going to Dark Pulse Indeedee. And I think I'm due for some luck after 3 consecutive Overheat misses, so let's see if Showdown agrees. I'm going to Dark Pulse Indeedee, try to prevent that from ever getting Trick Room up again in this game. I don't know, the Grovyle could be threatening some kind of big damage into Haunter, but if they are, I don't know what it is. I don't want to Terrasilize, because then Haunter is weak to the Alluring Voice from Indeedee. I might just end up not using my Terra this game, which is okay, it happens sometimes. But maybe some of my Terra types this week could have been thought through a little bit more. Or I'm just not getting into the situations where they're good, I don't know. Okay, they protect the Indeedee on the last turn of Trick Room. They Seed Bomb Haunter. They really don't seem to have good attacks to hit Haunter. But it actually will drop to another Seed Bomb. But I think what I can do here actually is I think I'm gonna... It could be Focus Sash Grovyle is the problem. So what I was going to say is I can Air Slash Grovyle and Terra Dark Pulse Indeedee. But having confirmed Grovyle's item, it's not Psychic Seed. I think Sash... it could be Eviolite. But otherwise I think Sash is pretty likely. Maybe I want to make that play anyway, just to find out. Yeah, I'm going to do it. And if it doesn't work out, at least I get information for game 2. Okay, it's not Sash Grovyle, so it drops to the Air Slash. Indeedee does not get knocked out by Dark Pulse, but it does flinch. I don't really feel like I have a problem with that, the way this game has gone. And we will take game 1 here. Just go Revelation Dance into Masquerain and Dark Pulse into Indeedee. And look at that, the 2 new Pokemon coming through in this endgame. But man, that one took some turns. That went... Well, quite literally, it took 10 turns to close that one out. But we do take game 1 here. And do I want to do anything differently in game 2? The Haunter was really good this game. The Oricorio was very good once I got it set up too. And given that they don't really have very fast threats, especially now that we know that it's not Psychic Seed Grovyle, I could probably just lead Lilligant Oricorio and try to set up immediately this time instead of messing around with Overheat misses. I think I'm going to bring the same 4 Pokemon, but Lilligant leading instead of Torkoal. The Haunter is still pretty strong here. I could try to click Sleep Powder into Indeedee. I didn't... Oh no, I do know that it doesn't have Safety Goggles because it has a Life Orb. So yeah, I could click Sleep Powder into Indeedee and take away the Trick Room. Yeah, so let's just do that. We'll see what they lead here. Masquerain and Medicham. So now here's something kind of fun. I don't know. I don't remember whether Medicham can learn Fake Out. At this point, I'm just going to treat it like it doesn't have that move, and we'll see if I'm punished. But here's something kind of fun. I think I am just going to click Quiver Dance with both of my Pokemon. That means Lilligant will use Quiver Dance once and Oricorio twice. But if they use Quiver Dance with Masquerain, then Oricorio will actually get 3 Quiver Dances this turn. Let's see if it happens. There's one. There's 2. No, just Tailwind. Okay. Tailwind, Psyshock. Alright, so Psyshock will do physical damage. That means it's not offset by the Quiver Dance. Special Defense Boost. Did I see Medicham's item in game 1? Yes, it's Psychic Seed. Okay. That means it's not Focus Sash. And that didn't do a whole ton of damage. I think it's pretty safe here. Oricorio resists both the Masquerain stabs too. I think it's pretty safe here to click another Quiver Dance with Lilligant and Air Slash the Medicham. Okay, Terra Psychic. So Revelation Dance was slightly more optimal there, but I guess that was the case before. Yeah, because that KOs. Okay. But yeah, I get the attack and I get another boost on Oricorio, and that's the power of Dancer there. Very glad to be bringing that right away after I pick this Pokemon up. We do see the Charmeleon in this game. I can think about switching Lilligant out, but honestly, I think I'm okay to let Lilligant go down here. And then it'd be nice if I had Protect to kill a turn of Tailwind, but I can bring Haunter in and Protect through the last turn of Tailwind then. And I can make sure that it's the last turn. I'm just going to click Quiver Dance in case they let me get away with it. I can make sure it's the last turn by getting rid of Masquerain. Okay, that's where the Sash is. We're not quite rid of it yet, but there's still another turn of Tailwind, so it can't reset it right now. And I do get another boost on the Oricorio. It's at +4 now. Takes that Bug Buzz like nothing. Dragon Claw on the Charmeleon. That actually does some chip. But now that they're prioritizing Oricorio, I think I can normal Weather Ball Masquerain to get rid of that last 1 hit point. And just Revelation Dance the Charmeleon. That's gone. Masquerain's gone. There's no more Tailwind. Says GG in the chat already. There is one Pokemon left, but yeah, I don't think it'll be able to pull this one back, whatever it is. I don't like to say GG's before it's fully over, but yeah, it's hard to imagine losing this one at this point. I feel like subbing into a season after being on a long hiatus isn't a good idea. Well, I mean, it depends on what you're trying to get out of it, I guess, right? I mean, it's very much appreciated that we do have a coach for every team. And I don't think people have crazy expectations. I can't sleep powder it, so let's just do this. I don't think people have crazy expectations or anything when you are subbing in after a long hiatus, just so that the team still exists. But also, I mean, I hope you're still having fun with this, Shadow. There's still almost half the season left to play. You have a lot of room for creative techs on your team. I think you're probably out of playoff contention now, at least after this set, but I hope you can still find something to get out of it, and if not, it is much appreciated that you're filling in. That's what I'll say to that. But that was, from the Masquerainmen side of things, a very good debut for the 2 new additions. Both Oricorio and Haunter put in work this week, and we are now over 500 for the first time this season. We have alternated loss-win so far. This is also the first time getting 2 consecutive wins. I keep saying it's going to be a hard schedule the rest of the way. That is very much true. I've been dropping a lot of hints throughout the season about who the remaining opponents are, and I can tell you there is not going to be an easy... There's not a single easy set left, but hopefully I have managed to cut out some of the things that weren't working from my team and go in a sort of more dynamic new direction that will work out somewhat better. Certainly it was encouraging, this result, with Oricorio and Haunter both putting in a lot of work, but regardless, 3 weeks left. Let's just try to lock in, make that playoff push, and chase that PDL championship.